Saint Augustine, or Augustine of Hippo, was a theologian, writer, preacher, and bishop, and he's one of the most influential figures of Christianity and also one of the most well-known. He was best known for being believed by many people to be the most influential philosopher within Christianity. Many of his works are still relevant today in modern Christianity, and he's believed to set an example for men and women around the world to follow within Christianity to this day. Saint Augustine was believed to be born in 354 at Targest, Algeria. He was the son of Patrice, a non-believer, and his devout Catholic wife, Monica. This religious dichotomy would later influence Augustine's spiritual journey, and he talks about it in many of his works. His parents cared a lot about his education, and though they weren't necessarily rich, they made sure that he was able to obtain a first-class education. At the age of 11, Augustine was sent to Mandros, a nearby city, to pursue his studies. He received a classical education there in literature, rhetoric, and philosophy, laying the foundation for his further pursuits and works. Augustine developed his own approach to philosophy and theology, accommodating a variety of different methods and perspectives, believing that the grace of Christ was indispensable to human freedom. His adaptation of classical thought to Christian teaching is believed to have created a theological system of great power and lasting influence on today's society. Both modern Roman Catholic and Protestant Christianity owe much to Augustine, because more than 5 million of his words and writings have survived and have a heavy influence on all of Christianity. He had many writings and preachings that have been saved and kept, but by far his most famous work is Confessions. Confessions consists of stories about Augustine's sinful childhood and ultimate conversion to Christianity, as well as his own personal feelings and struggles with finding God. It is told in 13 books and widely considered by Christians to be a huge, huge influence for Christian authors throughout the Middle Ages and to this day. This is a big part of why his impact is so big on modern Christianity, one of the biggest. The main topic in Confessions is what God is to Augustine and how he came to understand him on a personal level. And I feel like this sort of relationship with God really captured people and still does to this day, because it's what not most, but a lot of people are seeking, is that interpersonal relationship with the divine. And I think that's why a lot of people to this day gravitate to him and his writings, and I feel like specifically within Christianity, that's a big part of it, is having that personal relationship with your God. The book also talks about his conversion to Christianity, which did not actually happen until he was 31. It is believed by Christians that after years of intellectual exploration and spiritual relentlessness, Augustine experienced a series of encounters and inner struggles that ultimately led to his conversion, as well as the devout faith from his mother played a role. I believe that his journey and how long it actually took him to accept Christ into his life is a beacon for people who are unsure about religion but are curious about it, and it's sort of sets an example of you don't have to practice your religion in a certain specific rigid way. Like, it can be personal to you. And I think that's what he represents to a lot of Christians. After he was converted, he became a servant of God, and in this he agreed to live his life in celibacy. And he made that decision in spite of the fact that he had spent several years living with a woman who he deeply loved and fathered a son, Adotus. After his embracing of a life of prayer, work, and fellowship, he and Adotus and several of their companions prayed, worked, and lived together in a fellowship in Targist. They shared their insights about scripture and learned from one another. After 3 years, Augustine was called to be a priest while on a visit to the city of Hippo. He wasn't all for the idea of becoming St. Augustine of Hippo, but he believed it was God's will for him, so he chose to accept it. Tragically, his son did pass away only at age when Augustine was 36, and this caused him to throw himself into Christianity. He returned to his hometown and sold everything he had and gave all of his money to the poor and became an ordained priest. He put his skills to good use teaching and preaching and became a pretty admired preacher, and a lot of his sermons still survive and are some of his most treasured writings within Christianity. As a bishop, Augustine found that he desired a life of contemplation and separation from other worldly concerns. He focused on his obligations as a leader of the church and a civil official. Augustine also traveled as much as he could, almost 40 to 50 times over the course of 35 years that he served as a bishop. Though he did not travel as much as others within Christianity, his writings and sermons were the most influential thing that he left behind. He wrote over 200 books and nearly 1,000 sermons, letters, and other works that we still have to this day and are still very important within modern Christianity. Though Augustine's effect on Christianity is undeniable, especially within the philosophy world, there are some who believe that his influence is actually negative and against the core values of Christianity. Some believing that his Christian theology pushed a radical, toxic message, and it is hard to extradite from the current faith because he is so present and all of his writings are so influential. So even if you don't like Augustine and don't agree with his message, it is undeniable the impact that he has had on the religion as a whole, specifically the philosophy side, because of his bringing of practical perspective. The incorporation of philosophy into Christianity, I think, for a lot of people, sort of legitimizes it in some way, and it makes it an important factor for people who have a hard time just having faith in whatever they're faithful to. And they need more of a straightforward view on things, and I think that is what Augustine provided. The most influential part about Augustine is simply that so many of his works survived and are still referenced today directly by many Christians, and his influence will never go away.